Hi, everybody. I'm here with Hayden Hughes, and we're going to be talking about poetry. So, first of all, however, Hayden, give us a quick introduction to you and your background for anybody that doesn't know you.
Thanks, Adam. I'm Hayden Hughes. I've been working in recruitment for, oh goodness, well over a decade now, probably edging towards 2 decades. I'm passionate about sourcing, insight, and attraction, and specifically using and leveraging marketing and sales techniques, which I know you're a big fan of. That's something for me that's a real differentiator.
Hang on, you've skipped over quite a lot of stuff though, because you've had quite an illustrious career before that. You spent a lot of time in RPO, leading big teams. Tell us a bit more about all the sort of stuff that you were responsible for.
So I was with Alexander Mann Solutions, or AMS, as many people may know them, for about 15 years. Looked after teams globally, so I was responsible for teams across 8 different locations, working with a raft of different clients. So looking for everything from nuclear submarine engineer painters and heads-up display specialists, right up to and including managing directors for large investment banks. So really kind of wide plethora of roles, and that went from being a very small team initially at Deloitte, which is a team of 4 that I was responsible, up to and including hundreds of people, global locations, and we went on a huge journey as AMS, obviously now bought by Conferry, and just a fantastic and interesting evolution in terms of where the market went, bringing insight-led sourcing to clients, really being a pioneer in that area. Something I'm really passionate about is bringing insight to bear and ultimately really kind of changing the conversation you have with the hiring manager, because leveraging data, we talk about this a lot, but the reality is it really changes the conversation with hiring managers. And it was something that AMS was right at the beginning of, about kind of 2016, 2017. And it's been fascinating seeing the market change and evolve, and that become absolutely a bedrock of what we all do now as recruiters, using market data, using intelligence. And for me, that's one of the big selling points of poetry, is that ability to find and identify, here's the supply, here's the demand, here's where the great candidates you might have otherwise missed will come from.
Before we go into poetry, let's just spend a minute or two on the general sort of hiring enablement subject. To me, and one of the reasons I started getting interested in this in the first place was because it just dawned on me that the recruiter job is just such a broad role. And in organizations like AMS and some of the big TA teams, you can have centers of excellence to do different things and whatever. But in a lot of organizations, you can't have that, or it's not the right to do that. And recruiters are doing the 360-degree job, and they're doing everything from intake meeting right through to onboarding, and they need masses of intelligence and assets and things. Tell me about how you've thought about this over the years.
So honestly, it's been an evolution, and I think actually there's so many different ways of approaching this. You can go the full traditional 360 recruiter route, and ultimately at AMS we segmented to the nth degree. Actually, we segmented internal mobility. We had careers counselors and specialists in one of our banking clients. We went on that journey. Now you can over segment, and you can really kind of define. There's no question recruiters are not typically often all that good at administration, and actually the ability to segment and really bring out that level of expertise to clients, and using tech and AI to do that, to bring to life, this is how you have what I've always referred to as kind of, it's a bit cheesy, but moments that matter. So it's those key turning points that you have in a hiring manager conversation to say, okay, here's the referrals I've brought, here's the talent intelligence I've brought, here's the silver medalists I've brought to this conversation. If you're preparing and you're working well in a segmented model, or you're really thinking about how you're being quite intentional about the expertise you bring to that conversation, suddenly it really kicks it up a gear. So it goes from being a very order taker type role to then being, okay, this is how we're going to elevate the conversation. Here's how we're really going to kind of challenge our manager to say, well, you do realize that if you get candidates from this other tier 1 investment bank straight down the street. They're going to be coming in at this price point. They're going to be hard to find. They might not be that easy to entice. Actually, the ability to really be intentional and say, here's what the data is telling us. Here's some out of left field kind of wild card potential candidates. Suddenly it kicks the conversation up a gear, and the value that you're adding is really material.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think that the understanding the nuance and using judgment and bringing in ideas like the wild card and explaining why and achieving influence with candidates is something that, and with hiring managers, is something that recruiters often don't have time to do because they're deluged with so much other stuff. So in terms of poetry, my question is like, what's your impressions and experience so far?
Yeah, so obviously you and I have known each other for quite some time, and there's no question I've seen the journey you've gone on from being kind of candidate ideal, the work you've done over the last kind of 5 years or so, to the thoughtfulness and intentionality that you've got in poetry. For me, that's the really big selling point, is that poetry is designed by recruiters. So it's not designed by people that have worked in tech and have tried 4 or 5 different things and have then happened upon this idea and then kind of iterated. It's you sitting down with the team and saying, right, what does a really good process look like? How can we make sure that we've thought about personas, we've thought about data, we've thought about immediate competitors, all the stuff that agency side. I started my recruitment career at Michael Page, and it was the stuff that directors would sit down with you and say, right, have you thought about the conversation you're going to have on a briefing call, the conversation you're having with the hiring manager? That's the stuff that you and the team have thought about. And then you've had what I always refer to as the meeting before the meeting. You've been very intentional about, here's how we're going to make sure you're prepped and you have all of the information. And not only, by the way, are we going to give you that information, but we can configure it to your specific client needs. So if we're there speaking to you or to Stephen and saying, do you know what, we would love to see this information laid out in this way. I was on a call with Stephen yesterday and he was like, yeah, we can configure, we can tweak this, and we can make sure it's designed according to the client's needs. And then sure enough, a few days later, it's there and it's laid out in that very specific format. So for me, my lived experience of working with you is not only is it's thoughtful and intentional in terms of what recruiters need, but actually it's the configurability and it's listening and understanding the specific organization's needs and saying, right, okay, this is how we might do it versus what we're doing with this other competitor of yours or this other company in the market. So it's very intentionally being quite clear in terms of the approach that's being taken, which is marketing, it's sales, it's thinking about personas and how you're going to market to candidates, but also tailoring to the organizational needs. And that for me is the thing that makes any large employer stand, or even a small employer, stand out in the market right now, because we're all fighting for attention. So it's critical that you're really having a very clear voice in the market.
One last question. So with the organization you're currently working with, what are the kind of benefits you're going to be expecting?
Okay, so I'm working with CHI at the moment, which is the Clinton Health Access Initiative. So a phenomenal organization that is built around providing market shaping and many other things to ensure that drugs are received at the point of their most and greatest need to support HIV, to support malaria, TB, a raft of different cancer, various other different bits and pieces. Now, the challenge that we have at CHI is 85% of the team are on the ground delivering at point of need. So that has some very unique and specific requirements as a result. So if you're going out, so you might be 1 minute looking for someone that has phenomenally well educated and is able to show the market shaping capability and be able to work with a large pharma company in Boston, for instance. And then you might also be looking for a security guard to ensure that the life-saving drugs gets to someone in a specific country. So it can be that and everything in between. Now, the ability for us to talk to you and the team and say, do you know what, here's the requirements we have in Washington and Boston, here's the requirements we have in Eswatini. And for you to say, well, that's no problem. If you want French speaking, then we can do that. It's no problem if you want a very clear and delivered solution when it comes to immediate competitors, and all of the points in between. The flexibility, the configurability, the ability for us to have it out of the box, out and working within a couple of weeks. I've seen many, many demos over the years, but the difference between many other of your competitors and Poetry is the fact that you're having a conversation, you see the demo one week, the next week it's there and it's out of the box and it's working.
Great. Well, I'm glad it's going well so far. Just on the concept of recruiters being enabled to have like really great hiring manager conversations. One of the things that I put on LinkedIn this week was a simple graphic which showed recruiter one skips all those steps, works really fast, doesn't do the best job, get recruiter number two manually does all of those steps, does a great job, but doesn't get a huge amount of jobs filled. Whereas recruiter three, if you are immediately enabled with all of the talent intel and the marketing assets and the things that you've got, can both do the quality job around advising the hiring manager, as well as work rapidly because they've eliminated a huge amount of time. And that's kind of what we're aiming to achieve.
So for me, it's the time save, but I think so many businesses are focused on productivity and trying to get more juice out the lemon right now, and for very understandable reasons. But for me, it's the consistency piece that is the gold standard. That's the bit that everyone's chasing, that Poetry enables, that other tools don't necessarily deliver against, which is how can you make sure that a recruiter in one location is doing the same as a recruiter in another location, and at varying levels of capability, varying levels of hiring manager conversation. So you might have quite a junior recruiter that's still learning. They can benefit from the same consistency and standards as someone that has been in the job 10, 12 years and really understands the org. So if you're bringing someone up to speed on your organization, the ability to do that in a very quick fashion and to learn from all the capabilities you've got across the team, for me, there's so much focus these days on productivity and performance, which of course is critical for us all right now in these straitened times, but it's the consistency that is the real game changer.
Yeah, wonderful. Great. Hayden, thanks so much for your time. Great to see you today.
Thank you.